Well, the Brown University magazine came out this month, and they're delving into the subject of diversity, which of course is a national subject, and frankly always has been a national subject. So I thought it was a good opportunity for me to put some thoughts down on paper that I have on the subject, maybe how our friends in school contributed to this topic, and submit it to the magazine to see if they might want to publish it. But here's some of the writing. On diversity and funk night. Out of a fog, I heard, "Dave? Is that you, Dave? Why aren't you in Kansas City, Dave? What are you doing in Providence, so far away from Kansas City?" And with those words, it all began. It was freshman orientation week, 1980, and I found myself covered with sweat, looking up from the basketball gym floor at Chester's surprised face. I did not know anyone yet at Brown, and pickup ball sometimes felt like the only thing that was familiar to me from my home. Chester had been the only black face at the preparatory school I had attended through a scholarship in Kansas City some years before, and the same was probably true of the upper middle class suburb that he lived in. He was likely one of the few black faces around there. When he moved to a different state, I thought he had been lost to the sands of time. I also remembered he always said Kansas City with an intonation that suggested everyone from there was likely the result of inbreeding, and folks there just stood around aimlessly waiting for cows to fall asleep so they could be tipped. The part about cow tipping was probably unfair. Back in grade and high schools, I also knew what it felt like to be different from all those others that were around you. In those years, I lived in an 80-year-old laundromat in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city, and I was one of the only white faces for blocks. My dad was an artist and had purchased the building for $11,000. In time, I learned to move with ease in that world. Making observations about black and white was, and still is, as natural to me as observing the color of the sky or noticing different kinds of flowers. Being black or being white is a very simple part of our humanity, our lovely differences. Instead of exacting revenge for Chester elbowing me too hard on the court, I hugged him. And then I kept holding him more and more tightly. A quiet admission that I was farther away from my home, from Kansas City, than I would let myself admit to. The basketball court had always acted as a great social equalizer because both playing together and against one another disregarded skin color and neighborhood. And the particular court I found myself on that week produced a center of gravity that formed our eventual very close group of friends. Chester roomed with Carlos, my best man later in life. Nick played and roomed with Bill. Ira and Max dominated many games, and Chris, Sonny, the other Dave, Todd, Carter, Daryl, and Laurent all got caught up in the gravity field as well. I don't think any of us thought much of the fact that we were entirely split along color lines, half black and half white. We didn't even notice it in the beginning. In retrospect, we were all too busy experiencing simultaneous man crushes. We were all smitten with one another. But as we began moving about the campus, we quickly noticed the difference and uniqueness that our tribe represented. Together, we saw and experienced racism, indirect racism, reverse racism, racism within the races. It was all there. I saw my black friends struggle with racism from their own, just like I felt the indirect sting of racism from my own. Many white fraternity members seemed to look at the whites in our group as if we had some sort of unfamiliar disease worthy of quarantine. while many black fraternity members looked at the blacks in our group as if they had committed a cardinal sin worthy of excommunication. I tried once to sit with some black fraternity members at the Ratty, and I walked away with radiation sickness. I was so unwelcome. And then there were some white students that uttered racial epithets towards many of those same black students as they made their way to dying. Racism is an ugly and complicated thing, and our group of friends became a lightning rod for the topic on campus. We were completely unintended activists. Through trying to become friends, we unknowingly caused deep divisive wedges, evidence of the confrontation that we were causing. In fairness, we also saw some more progressive and sophisticated responses from students, ranging from mystification to attraction. In retrospect, members of our clan were, and still are, contradictions ourselves, and we became a social group of contradictions also. We soon saw the need for our own unique socializing platform, so Ira and Max started spinning and scratching funk music for us. We danced in the dark, in dorm rooms, in apartments, and in school facilities like the Underground, the reigning campus bar. We moved, sweated, bumped, screamed, laughed, and drank until the wee hours of the morning. New York City was piping the music to Providence, and we translated those new urban sounds into joy, friendship, sensuality, and purpose. These gatherings became our campus signature, and Funk Night was born. The ritual became weekly, and we came up with new ways to advance it: better speakers, more extended play records, microphones, lights, and flyers to spread the word. The gravity that had formed us now actively extended to others in the campus. Eventually, the initially hostile fraternity folks came, and they danced as well. And all of us discovered on a very deep level that it is very hard to maintain strain in relations when you have danced, sweated, moved, and bumped next to one another. There is something very real about dancing. It is a type of intelligence and communication that eclipses language. In Chicago, years later, I practiced my business tradecraft largely on the South Side, in Obama's launching territory, and got an exposure to the nonprofit community and black culture there that few white men have experienced, I suspect. I was taught by black men there that they never wanted me to use the term African American because they were Americans. I saw their point and have complied ever since. I remember once walking into a meeting with 4 black ministers at the offices of a nonprofit. They were dressed in beautiful black robes, accented with purple, and they carried themselves slowly and deliberately as if they were constantly aware they were representing divinity. They sat down and promptly preempted our discussion by making clear that they first wanted to know what percentage of minorities that my company employed. It would have been typical for a guy like me to be very aware that I was white in that moment, but I remembered the lessons that my black teachers had taught me. I slowly and deliberately responded back that I was not a social worker, that I was a businessman and an entrepreneur. I was respectful but clear, and added that I was there only for the purpose of doing business with them in a manner where we could all prosper, and that my company was not a training platform for anyone or anything, minority or otherwise. I finished with the idea that I had no interest in training competitors that could eventually undermine me or my family's well-being. After a long pause where I found myself being inspected, thin sliced, as writer Malcolm Gladwell might say, very carefully, we proceeded to the subjects of our business meeting. When it was over, we traded handshakes and warmth. As I was leaving, I turned and shared that the percentage that they had asked about was a little over 50. We all broke into knowing smiles. I worked alongside Dr. James Bevel, who was a close associate of Dr. King's, played by actor-rapper Common in the film Selma, and found myself down the street from Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church, helping to organize the National Day of Atonement, the sequel to the Million Man March. Father Michael Fleger, who just collaborated with Spike Lee on the film Chirac here, was the only other white face in the room at the Nation of Islam headquarters. When the Reverend Al Sampson, perhaps Chicago's version of Al Sharpton, introduced me as a righteous white brother, I looked over and saw Minister Louis Farrakhan clapping along with everyone else. As a Midwestern white kid, I would feel a little bit like Forrest Gump when things like this happened to me. But make no mistake about it, I knew my travels in the black community in Chicago had something to do with Funk Night. I felt like I had already danced with all of these folks, and therefore I carried myself as one who knew that he belonged. And I think others around me clearly sensed that. At Brown, our black and white group had to face some very uncomfortable topics within itself involving race, since we were so close and felt so much for each other. Seeing the world better through the eyes of my black friends could be very painful, because empathy is a natural part of love. And I still see the effects of institutional racism clearly in my black friends' lives today. Some conversations were very hard, but necessary. Others felt revelatory, like we had just mapped the human race genome for the first time in history. In Nick's words, we felt it was indeed growing pains of our crew that truly started racial integration in a truer and more natural way. Our checkered group of close friends graduated in 1984, George Orwell's prophetic year. When many of us returned to Providence for our 30th reunion some months back, we snuck into Funk Night, which we could see had survived all of these years. Just like when it began, the room was a cacophony of people, a rich mix of race and ethnicity, and it seemed a more complicated group that included more racial and ethnic diversity, gender, and sexuality pluralism. I told the disc jockey that some of the founders were in the house and asked him to shout out for Ira James and Maxwell Jones, rest in peace, specifically, which he honored. What song did I want played? George Clinton's Atomic Dog, of course. Just like the old days, we started moving, and all differences evaporated. One of the students told me that night that Funk Night had done more for race relations than anything else on the Brown campus. If Brown is a melting pot, then Funk Night has at least been a consistent burner under that pot. I called Ira a few months back. I greeted him with, "Ira, you big, black, beautiful man." And he responded with, "Dave, you strange, funky, white brother." We laughed hard. And then I found myself explaining that for me and probably others, he and Max had been the arbiters of cool. When the band Yes, for example, introduced Owner of a Lonely Heart, no one fully knew if it was a dope song and should be included in the dance mix until Ira and Max said so. They always played lots of different kinds of music over a broad spectrum, and I had always been impressed with what they considered cool. I thought their tastes were very subtle and informed. No, 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 Dave, Ira slowly and patiently began to say. I noticed he had dropped the timbre and slowed down the cadence of his voice. He liked to do a pretty good rendition of Jeffrey Holder, the black actor who did the Uncola Nut commercials, and whose voice was arguably deeper and richer than the one belonging to James Earl Jones. Both of us knew what Ira was doing, and we both reveled in it. He was really laying on his blackness for me, preening and displaying his peacock feathers, illustrating the power and knowing reflected in his race's deep, ancient African ancestral roots. My job in those moments was just to be and act white, so I could be a contrast, to experience more fully his beautiful blackness. We loved playing our respective roles. I knew that was what was happening as a matter of form, but I didn't know where he was going yet. He continued. We just played all those other songs because people who came from everywhere were into them, and we thought they would have a better time if we played stuff they really liked, music that they were into. It occurred to me that I had never known or noticed that fact, even after almost 35 years of memories and reflections. Seamless inclusivity when considering other people's music, just like the seamless inclusivity we should aspire to in all racial matters. Love when considering other people's fun, just like the love we should illustrate when caring for peoples of other colors. Understanding, brotherhood, sisterhood, and harmony. Maybe before any racial issues are engaged at Brown on institutional levels, it would be wise to require all participants to go dance in the dark together. Maybe everyone would feel more connected that way and become freer to just talk about things openly. I hope that Funk Night provides fire for the race melting pot at Brown for decades to come.
Oh, let me fly, just let me fly, well, let me fly to Mount Zion, hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, let me fly, just let me fly, well, let me fly to Mount Zion, hallelujah, hallelujah. Well, I never saw the light since I was born, just getting ready to fly away. Everybody keep talking about judgment morning, just getting ready to fly away. Better get your wings and try them on, just getting ready to fly away. If you want to be there when they blow the horn, just getting ready to fly away. Oh, well, let me fly, just let me fly, oh, well, let me fly to Mount Zion, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, let me fly, let me fly, oh, let me fly to Mount Zion, hallelujah.